papers on it, explained to other people, but this is a really important aspect. So this was founded by the Fatimids, by the Ismailis, and it became one of the great teaching centers of the Muslims. This is another, the University of Timbuktu, founded in 982. One of them, and this is one of the most important centers of learning. In fact, in Africa, this was a treasure that people came from all over to study in this incredible Sankuri University. Timbuktu recently, and there's a book that you should read, it's called The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu. And I read that book, and I'm honored to say that I actually know the badass librarian of Timbuktu, Sheikh Zubair, who is a student of our teacher, Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya. He came to Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya in the 1950s and studied with his father and also studied with the Sheikh. He went on to get a PhD. This is a man from Mali who went on to get a PhD at Sorbonne University, the Harvard of France. I mean, the French would be horrified for me to say that because they consider Harvard the Sorbonne of America. But anyway, the Harvard of France, right? We're Americans after all. The Harvard of France, Sorbonne, he got a PhD from that university. He went back and cataloged over 300,000 manuscripts in Timbuktu. This is what Islam did for Africa. These were Africans that became some of the most literate human beings in human history. And one of the greatest, Ahmed Baba Timbuktu, which is the man that Sheikh Zubair did his PhD dissertation on, when the fanatics took over Timbuktu. This is recently, people, these extremists took over Timbuktu, the Black Flags. They were so fearful that they hid all of the books in houses. And the Belgian government and the Germans actually organized with these librarians, two of them, one of them Sheikh Zubair and his student who lived in Timbuktu. They sent them special discs in order for them to put these manuscripts into discs that would protect them from water, and they sneaked them out over a period of time. They got the entire library of Timbuktu out because they were so afraid that these fanatics would burn all of this material because they considered it bid'ah and filled with Sufism and other things. Over 300,000 manuscripts. This was our civilization. This was our civilization. Timbuktu is one of the great learning centers. I actually almost died in Timbuktu. I got amoebic dysentery. I was incredibly sick, and I was saved by two French tourists. My friend, I couldn't even walk. I couldn't get out of bed, but Hassan Barrett, who was with me, we were both 18 years old. Hassan Barrett actually went out and told some tourists that their friend was like literally had blood everywhere and he couldn't get out of bed. They actually had flagyl with them, which is the specific antibiotic. So I could have been just a statistic of one of the many European travelers that died in Africa, but I wasn't. Zahiriya school, another one. Let me go back to that one. This is, look how beautiful the Muslims. One of the things that really struck me, I was at University of Berkeley the other day for talking at one of Dr. Hatim's classes that he teaches there, and I gave a lecture on Imam al-Ghazali. One of the things that really struck me was how ugly the classroom was. And it really bothered me. It was so ugly. And I was thinking, the Muslims always honored their knowledge by making the most beautiful environments to study in. And I guarantee you, if you were able to go to the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, it would have been the most beautiful place you've ever seen. Maybe not with the ornamentation, but I've been to some of the most beautiful places in Mauritania where they study in these just simple natural structures surrounded by a natural environment, and it's just so peaceful. There's a sakina that you get, a tranquility. But this is the great Zahiriya College of Syria. May Allah, inshallah, restore law and order to that place and bring salvation to those people and help all of the refugees. What did they study at these places? The first thing and the most important thing that they really understood was revealed religion. But one of the interesting things about our scholars, and this is partly because of the Mu'tazilite experience, when the traditionalists were confronted with rationalism, one of the things that they realized was, if you say the Quran is true, and somebody says, well, how do you know it's true? And he says, because the Quran says so. This is called circular reasoning. And so our scholars realized that we have to predicate our knowledge on something that is actually precedes revelation, and that is intellect. This is not a Mu'tazilite position. This is mainstream Sunni and Shia Islam. This is literally the mainstream. This is not rationalism. They actually believed that it was the aqal, afala ta'qilun, that it was the intellect that was the foundation, and it was revelation that enlightened the intellect. But you have to know, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. You have to know that there's no God but God. How do you know that? Through rational thinking, through a process of thinking deeply about things. And this was, obviously this is a debate. People, some of the ulama here know about the Maturidi and the Ash'ari positions about tahkim al-aql, and I don't want to get into that debate. So it's a debate, I understand that. But this was the position that many, many Sunni scholars took. But the subjects that they really rooted their knowledge in are the trivium and the quadrivium. Nasiruddin al-Tusi from the Shia tradition was an extremely important scholar about what are called the aqliyat, the intellectual sciences. He was studied by Sunni scholars because his books were considered so important. He's also famous for his knowledge of what's called geography and trigonometry and these other areas. But he said in his beautiful book called Akhlaqi Tusi, he says that the foundation of all knowledge is the 3 language arts and the 4 numerical arts, the qualitative arts and the quantitative arts. So this is something that our scholars understood. In the trivium, you have grammar. These were called in Arabic al-sana'at al-thalath, the 3 skills or arts. Grammar, and this is not just learning the parts of speech. It was considered literature, prosody, learning. One of the sciences that we have lost was called ilm al-muhadarat. If you ask an alim today, and I'm not talking about really truly great ones, and I learned this from one of the great scholars, so I'm not making any claims personally, but if you ask most ulama today, what is ilm al-muhadarat? They wouldn't know. They would think it's a lecture, because in modern Arabic you call a lecture muhadara. But traditionally, ilm al-muhadara was actually learning what in rhetoric is called copia. It's learning basically what E.D. Hirsch, if you know anything about educational theory, calls domain knowledge, cultural literacy. So muhadara was learning cultural literacy. Every scholar should be every Muslim should have general knowledge about life. And believe it or not, we had 1,001 Isaac Asimovs in Muslim history. We had people like Imam Suyuti. Imam Suyuti wrote on every subject under the sun. He actually wrote a book, الطريقة المنافى في صنعة الكنافة. He wrote a book called The Best Way to Make Kunafa. And this is one of the ulama of Egypt, right? And it's just amazing. And so our scholars, they love knowledge, and knowledge was widespread. I read a beautiful book about Egypt in the medieval period, from a Western point of view, in the medieval period, about cultural literacy in Egypt. The fact that every middle-class Egyptian prided him or herself on their libraries. And that when you went into an Egyptian middle-class house, you were struck by the books in their house. This was widespread in the Muslim world. Literacy was widespread in the Muslim world. There are more illiterate people today in the Muslim world than there were in the medieval period. This is simply a fact. Everybody knew how to read the Quran. That was just a basic foundation in Muslim culture and civilization. But many of them actually became quite learned. We have a whole, about between 10 and 15% of the notable scholars in every generation until the 16th century of Christian era. 10 to 15, think about this, 10 to 15% of every single generation of Muslims, of the notable scholars, were women. 10 to 15%. I'm not talking about just general scholarship. The ones that were mentioned in what are called the tabaqat literature, the biographical literature of the scholars of any generation, 10 to 15%. It's an incredible number when you think about the previous time. And then you had revealed religion, you had the quadrivium. Every Muslim scholar learned arithmetic, geometry, harmony, astronomy, the maqamat. They learned all the maqamat. Many of the scholars were well versed in the modes of what we would call today music. The recitation of Quran, great Quran reciters in Egypt and Syria and Iraq actually still study the maqams, the modes. So they recite the Quran in these, what we would call certain scales, and I don't want to go into music theory, but these are ways that affect the soul when you hear them, like maqam al-rast, which makes people happy. There's also certain maqams that make you sad. So if the verse was a sad verse, they would put it into that maqam, and you would feel sadness. And then you had astronomy. These were very important. And then the revealed religious knowledges, fiqh, law, jurisprudence, usul al-fiqh, theology, exegesis, which is the hermeneutics of understanding the Quran, readings, the variants, and then the prophetic tradition. If you looked at the colleges and universities, the areas that they became experts in, law and politics, because you want to heal the social body through law and through politics. So law and politics were very important, healing the social body. Theology and philosophy, which involved ethics and psychology, was healing the mental and spiritual body. And then medicine, which was healing the physical body. So you had a holistic approach to your culture, that you could heal the culture through just laws and through political governance. Muslims never created a Machiavelli. Machiavelli, according to Leo Strauss, the first wave of modernity is Machiavelli's book, which was the first major departure from the idea of virtuous governance to an idea of governance based on craftiness, based on expediency, and based on power, raw power. We never